We are live on YouTube and LinkedIn. Our topic today is COP29, a ship breaking up on the rocks of economic reality. This is the profile of our invited guy, Steve Gottenham, Executive Director of Climate Science Coalition of America, author of 4 books, and one of these books has more than 100,000 copies in print. Welcome, Steve Gottenham.
Hello, Armando. Great to join you again.
Thank you. Steve, you sent a quantity of pictures for me, so please ask to share when you are speaking and you need a picture to support your speech. Let me start, please, Steve, with we are having multiple events and long speeches. This one in Azerbaijan, led by United Nations. Do you know that what was decided there, who participate, what the context of this Azerbaijan meeting, you know?
Yeah, this is the COP29. The COP means Conference of the Parties. They've had 29 of these now. The first one was in 1995. They have one almost every year. It's a United Nations-led event, and the idea here is to try and control human-caused global warming, which is going to be very, very difficult to do. But nevertheless, and they have something like 67,000 attendees in Baku, Azerbaijan, on the Caspian Sea. And it's very ironic because, first off, this is the probably the biggest carbon dioxide emitting event of the year. They have all these people flying in on commercial or private jets and then taking limousines and taxis to the conference. And if you go to Baku, the whole area, both the land and the Caspian Sea, are filled with oil derricks producing oil. I think this was the first place in the world that oil was actually drilled prior to the United States even. And so it's really very ironic in many, many ways. But there are many things being discussed in the conference. And they're trying to decide how much money to give from rich nations to the developing nations. And I think Brazil is considered a developing nation. So is China, and so is India. So it's a little bit crazy in some ways. But the developing nations have asked for $1 trillion a year, really a vast, vast sum. And nobody, the nations that are being asked to give up this money don't really want to do that. The latest number they've come up with is $250 billion a year to be transferred to help developing nations adapt to and to avoid the use of coal, oil, and natural gas. And but they say it's too small, and so we're kind of at an impasse at the conference regarding funding.
The center of the discussion is the funding. You have an echo, probably. You have a.
You sound good from my end.
Yeah.
Am I okay?
Yes, okay. So the center of the discussion, the target is how can transfer money from wealthy countries to developing countries. But
that's a big part of it.
Yeah, but do they have commitments, homework to do? What the agenda? What are the good news that they have?
Well, I don't know that there is very much good news. You can go down a couple slides. So you have another one that you've put up. There have been a number of nations pledging no new coal at COP29. I guess 25 countries. But overall, there's been very little repeat of the COP28 conclusion, was that we would move away from hydrocarbon fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. A matter of fact, we had the president of Azerbaijan, the host, Ilhan Aliyev, who said that oil and gas were a gift from God, and the OPEC nations repeated that, and we've had many nations that have not really renewed the push to get rid of coal, oil, and natural gas. So many people in the conference are complaining about that. Go to the next slide, if you would.
Sure.
So who is attending the conference? One of the big attendees is Brazil, of course.
Yeah.
And Brazil is going to be the host for COP30, which is supposed to occur next year in Belém, Brazil. So they're trying to make a good showing. We also have some others. We have Australia is there in force. They want to be the host in 2026 of the COP31, and they're battling it out with Turkey right now. But and then we have folks like John Podesta, who was there, and who is the leader of the U.S. delegation. There's a number of people. Why don't we skip down 2 slides? I want to put a couple of pictures up there, and we'll come back to the next one. So go down one more. So that on the left is Ilham Aliyev, the president of Azerbaijan, and on the right is Javier Milei, who's the president of Argentina, and I think he was there with a pretty big. Oh, I'm sorry, is he premier? He's president, I think. He was there with a big group from Argentina.
President. Yeah, president.
But they have been expelled. The Argentinian group has been expelled, and so there's a fair amount of tension going on. They weren't agreeing with the main proposals, which were transfer a lot of money, and then the second one, get rid of coal, oil, and natural gas. So go back the other direction on one slide, if you would. And by the way, just interrupt me if you want to put a question in here.
Yeah. Belém is a city in the north part of the country and part of the Amazon forest. So it's a beautiful place, but totally different from the south part that I live in.
Well, that's important. The Amazon's important. People have fears that forests are disappearing globally, including the Amazon. But as I sometimes present, what is going on is that the rate of deforestation has actually been being reduced. It's declining decade by decade. We lost less forests globally last decade than the previous decade and the decade before that. This is from United Nations data. And we now have about 2/3 of the world where forests are either stable or growing. And that includes the United States and Canada and Europe, Russia and China, Australia, New Zealand. We're still losing forests in Central and South America, the numbers show, and also in Africa and Southeast Asia. But as nations get wealthier and as their agricultural techniques get better and they start using modern fuels, then they stop cutting down the forests. And so I'm expecting and projecting that by 2050, we will, at the latest, we will have net forest growth globally. And so I have high hopes that the forests will come back, and Brazil and all other nations will have stable and growing forests.
Yeah. Steve, with the election of Mr.
So
Trump,
on this slide,
please go ahead.
Let me talk about this slide a little bit. So this is a little more of the dissension at the conference. They have a thing called NCQG, the New Collective Quantified Goal, and that's where they're asking for more than $1 trillion a year. And that is down to about $250 billion a year from the wealthy nations, and even that is not agreed to. And then there's a big effort to try and tax all sorts of things. They want to tax coal, oil, and gas globally. That's being recommended. They want to tax airlines. They want to tax billionaires and the wealthy people around the world. And there are just many, many taxes that they're proposing to put on people around the world so that they can help nations not use coal, oil, and gas and adapt to the climate. So that's the sign here about make the rich polluters pay.
And what do they make with this money that they receive? Is there a control?
Well, that's kind of funny. About a quarter of all international aid now is tied to climate in one way or the other. And the idea, I think, is to support wind and solar, and to have nations commit to not using coal and not using oil and not using natural gas. But that's a very, very difficult thing. Those are the things, those hydrocarbon fuels are the things that brought prosperity to many, many parts of the world over the last 70 years or so. So it's a tough thing to forego those. I actually think this net zero idea, we get rid of coal, oil, and gas is literally impossible. It's not going to occur.
And do United States participate intensively in these meetings?
Well, they are now, but what's overshadowing all this, and you can go down another 2 slides.
Yeah.
Go down 2 slides.
Yeah, but exactly, because that's a point that I would like to address for you. Election of Mr. Trump was a big difference with Democrats.
It's going to be a huge difference, and I'm going to talk about that a little more as we go down. But one of the things Mr. Trump did during his first term, he was elected in 2016, served to 2020, and then he was defeated, but now he's been reelected and starting a term in 2024. And what he did in 2018 is withdraw from the United Nations Paris Climate Agreement, where all of the nations signed up to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce the use of coal, oil, and natural gas. And he withdrew the United States from that. President Biden, who followed him, restored the U.S. into the Paris Climate Agreement, but it's virtually certain that Mr. Trump is going to withdraw again. And this time is going to be a little different because he is working very fast to put all sorts of people into his cabinet and into government positions. He was very slow on that in his first term, but he has proposed many, many people for nomination. And I think he's going to have a huge impact on U.S. Energy. We'll talk about that as we go down a little further. So let's go to the next slide and talk about what are the effect of the COP conferences. What is the real effect? And the problem with these things is they really aren't doing anything in a real way.
What's the blue and what's the red curve? What does it mean, each one?
So the blue is the rise in global energy consumption, and that has increased by about 47% from the year 2000 to 2021. It has tripled since 1965, and the only year energy consumption has gone down in the last 55 years was 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic. The red curve is the amount of carbon dioxide emissions, and you can see they've risen a little bit slower, but almost the same, and they've risen by about 44% from 2000 to 2021. Yet the UN is calling for those CO2 emissions to drop. They're calling for world energy use to drop. There's really no evidence that this is going to occur. And again, so people at the conference are promoting things that aren't likely to happen. We still need developing nations to grow. We have 700 million people that don't have access to electricity today. We have 2 billion people that have blackouts and brownouts every day and every other day. So about a third of the world doesn't have enough electricity. And then things like, for example, automobiles. Developing nations have only roughly 1 automobile for every 20 persons. In the United States, it's 1 for every 1 or 1 for every 2 people. And as developing nations develop, they're going to use more and more vehicles. We can go to the next slide if you want, or hit me with a question.
Sure. No, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this is the next example of where these conferences aren't having any effect. Again, these COP conferences have been going on since 1995, and this is the gray curve shows the portion of coal, oil, and gas in world energy use. It's been declining very, very slowly over many years, but it's still about 81% in 2021. And this is the same as it was in 1999. And that's despite the fact that we put in 300,000 wind turbine towers and spent $5 trillion in the last 2 decades globally on wind and solar and biofuels. But there's been almost no change. People are still using huge amounts of hydrocarbons, as they should be. Those things are are very powerful energy sources that help grow wealth and income and standard of living for people. So really,
And
when you
what
get down to it, these COP conferences are almost a charade. They're really not doing anything, despite getting these tens of thousands of people together.
But that's the point. What would be the results, expected results of these meetings? What what could we expect from them?
Well, they're all saying we need to get to net zero by 2050, which means pretty much elimination of coal, oil, natural gas, or what we can eliminate. They want to capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Again, that's more than a reach out goal, pretty much an impossible task. There's really no evidence that we can convert our societies to do that. So a little bit more about the U.S. if you switch to the next slide.
Yeah, sure.
So these are two big
Oh,
players in the U.S. The one on the left is Lee Zeldin. He was a former representative from the state of New York to the U.S. Congress. He's been selected and nominated to be Environmental Protection Agency Administrator in the United States. And it's expected he's going to make some big changes. For example,
for
go
EPA,
ahead.
this guy is
Yeah,
going to EPA.
Yes, he's going to EPA.
What's the meaning of EPA? Environmental?
The Environmental Protection Agency, which makes
Okay.
regulations for all sorts of society. For example, they have put regulations into place. They approved them in April for all the power plants in the United States, which limit their carbon dioxide emissions and may force them to either shut down plants or use carbon dioxide capture and storage. Now
And
that
what's the
regulation,
experience? And what experience this guy has to become?
well, again, he's
high
been
position?
he's been in Congress for a number of years, and he's voted on a bunch of different environmental things. So he has a little bit of experience, but the big thing is he's a climate skeptic, as I am. He thinks climate is dominated by nature, and he wants to focus on clean air and clean water. And every nation needs to continue to clean up the air and the water, but that doesn't mean carbon dioxide. Each of us, as we burn sugars in our body every day, we exhaust 2 pounds of carbon dioxide, a little bit less than 2 kilograms every single day when we breathe it out. And it makes plants grow. It's not something that should be considered a pollutant. So as I was going to say, this power plant regulation that was put into place by the Biden administration is being challenged in court by about 20 U.S. states. And I expect that Zeldin will not try and save that regulation, and the Department of Justice will not fight that battle. There are other regulations on automobiles and heavy trucks that the EPA has put into place, and those things are going to fall by the wayside as well. So big changes. The guy on the right is Chris Wright. He's been nominated for Energy Secretary. He's been involved in about 10% of the oil and gas in the U.S. He was an entrepreneur, and he founded a let's see if I can find the company here.
A company of fracking, natural gas fracking.
He founded a fracking company, and so he's a very outspoken critic of climate policies. And so the Department of Energy, some of the things Mr. Trump has said they're going to do is we're going to stop funding offshore wind, which is really going to stall that industry. The other thing that he says is that we will cut the tax credits for electric vehicles, which are $7,500 for a new vehicle. And then if you even sell a used vehicle, you get about $4,000 in a tax credit. And if it's sold again, there's another tax credit.
Yeah, but Elon Musk is part of the government. He is very strong.
Yes.
He has interest in Tesla. It's like a contradiction.
Well, except that Tesla there's a limit on those credits, and Tesla's already gone past the limit, I think. So if we get rid of those, it'll be all the competitors that aren't able to get them who have lower shipments than Tesla. So in that regard, it's not going to hurt them that much. But these two folks, Zeldin and Wright, are going to overturn many things that are going on, along with Mr. Trump and some other folks. And so
But
we're going to see a complete reversal in the United States of energy policy.
yeah, Steve, but only for 4 years. And
Yeah,
after
that's
four
right.
years, if Democrats win again, I don't know, of course,
They could put
everything
they could
can move it to another side.
they could be put back into place again in 4 years. Very unstable we are.
Exactly. It's same Brazil, exactly the same. Yeah, elections, because that's the reason China and Russia goes every time to the right direction, because they have one president for 20 years. Uh, let's change a little bit our conversation to
Yeah.
hurricanes and tornadoes. This is something a nightmare for solar and wind energy installations. What exactly is happening? You have some information about this, no?
Well, what's going on is we're installing solar, particularly in many areas of the United States. And you can put up the next slide that shows a solar field that is crunched, if you will.
Sure, sure.
But one of the things about wind and solar is that I think we've talked about before, is they require 20 times the land of a traditional coal or natural gas plant. Another thing is the coal and natural gas plants are under a roof. They're inside. They're protected somewhat from the weather, where these solar fields just are out there, and the weather is just crunching these things now. This is a picture of a solar installation in Florida that was destroyed by tornadoes that were spawned by Hurricane Milton. This happened about 2 months ago, and the tornado just came up and ripped the whole thing apart. Go to the next slide. And an even bigger problem than tornadoes are hailstorms in the United States. We get a lot of hail in the central part of our nation, and this is a look at the Scotts Bluff, Nebraska installation. And you can see many of those panels were damaged. They had something like 14,000 solar panels that were destroyed. They've rebuilt it, but it cost like $60 or $70 million to do that.
Wow.
Go to the next slide.
Sure.
This just happened in March of this year. This is another solar installation in Fort Bend County, Texas, just northwest of Houston. This had only been in operation for about a year. They barely turned it on, and the whole thing was destroyed. It's going to cost over $100 million to replace this. And so insurance rates are skyrocketing for solar systems now. The average claim is $58 million, and they're going up and up. And policies now the prices are up 300 or 400% on insurance, and they're also limiting the amount that they'll cover. They'll only cover maybe $10 million worth of damage, and so a developer has to go out and get 5 or 6 or 7 insurance policies to try and cover his project. So this is going to get to be a bigger and bigger problem as we spread these solar fields out across the country. If you look at the next slide,
Sure.
this is from the University of Iowa State, and those red areas and pink areas show that we have between 20 and 30 days a year of hail in the central part of the U.S., all of those states. So where they built these solar installations, they're going to have a real problem with always having to replace these things. They have a 25-year lifetime, but if they get crunched in 5 years, that's really not a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So just another weakness. And I've just written an article that's going to be published, I think, in Master Resources called "Wind and Solar Might Be Green, but They're Fragile," and it talks about this problem.
Yeah, and this may be one of the reasons majors, oil companies, are giving up solar and wind. Did you hear about this?
Well, it is, yeah, and if you look at the stock prices of green equipment companies, they've done very, very poorly. I think we've talked about before the RENIX index, RENIXX, which is a worldwide index of the top 30 industrial green equipment companies. And over the last 20 years, it's gone down a little bit in value, the index. At the same time, these Standard & Poor's 500 has quadrupled. And we have many cases. The top 8 solar companies in the world, their stock price has been falling the last 3 years. Most of those are Chinese. The EV charging companies, none of them can make money. They're all losing money, and their stock prices are down. The top wind companies are down. There's a company called Plug Power that produces hydrogen that hasn't made a profit in 25 years. It's been in existence. And so, as you say, the oil companies are starting to say, well, we can't really invest in wind and solar. They just don't make any money. There's no way we can justify the projects. And this is just another example of the coming green breakdown.
And if you have $100, in which one you could invest, solar or wind?
Well, I wouldn't invest in any of those. I don't even invest in oil and gas because the markets are very volatile. I like very big companies that are being sued for antitrust. You know, things like Apple and those sort of firms. Personally,
the title of your article is very attractive, very interesting. And please, Steve, tell about your books. You have a recent book that's called which
Green Breakdown. Sure. Put up the next slide.
Oh,
sure. So the Green Breakdown talks about the energy transition that the world is proposing, and they're proposing in COP29 that we shift from coal, oil, and natural gas to wind, solar, and biofuels. But this just isn't going to occur. So this book discusses power plants, home appliances, electric vehicles, heavy industry, heavy transportation, the recent energy crises in Europe, and points out how green energy means higher energy prices and electricity blackouts, less freedom because they want to take away your gasoline car and your natural gas stove, and how this is not going to happen. The other thing about this book is it has all sorts of fun sidebars, which are real crazy headlines, like the Swedish professor who is giving lectures saying we should all try human flesh to try and stop climate change. And then he literally asks his audience who's willing to try human flesh after the end of his lecture. But I mean, there are just many, many examples of just craziness where people are doing things that you wouldn't think are reasonable in any way, all because of the fear that humans are causing dangerous climate change. So that's what the book is about, and people need to get a copy and learn the real story.
And where can interested people can find these books?
Yeah, they can go to my website, stevegorham.com. It's Steve G and then GOREHAM, and I'll send them a signed copy. They're also available on Amazon and in bookstores, and there are ebooks available as well, which are a little bit less expensive. I also have 3 other books. Yeah.
These are your books too?
There's a couple of them. Yeah, one of them that's great for kids, and in many countries, the students are getting a very one-sided story on climate change, even to the extent that kids don't want to grow up and have families and have children anymore. But I would recommend parents get a copy of the Mad World of Climatism, which is great for about 8th graders on up. It's got the polar bears and the Mazda on the front cover. And again, a color paperback with a lot of sidebars about our crazy world.
Perfect. Steve, for the conclusion, are you a pessimist with renewables?
Well, renewables, I'm not necessarily against wind or solar. If you can put solar on your roof, and if you get a real good subsidy from the government, it can be a good job. Or if you're in Hawaii and you don't have any pipelines out there, wind and solar work pretty well. But the traditional things like hydropower that Brazil uses and others in big ways have been very, very effective and very low cost. And I just think, again, we should let these things compete. We should value them for their reliability and their cost and their real environmental impact or benefits. Not with the idea that if we all drive electric cars, we could stop the oceans from rising. That really is modern foolishness. So let's get back to sensible energy policy.
Yeah. And probably this January will be a game changer in the United States. Of course, and the influence in the world is very strong.
Well, we think so. I think first term was a little bit early, but I think maybe people are ready to speak out now and get back to sensible policy, which is going to mean lower prices and more reliable more reliable energy, and let's work on real issues like plastic in the oceans and wastewater that's discharged into rivers, lakes, and streams. We
Good
need to
points.
clean those up. Yeah.
Good points. These two last points are very, very important. Yeah. Thank you so much, Steve Gordonham.
Thank you again, Armando. Keep up your great work.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.